All right, I do believe we have Utah State football head coach Bronco Mendenhall on the show. Bronco, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Glad we could have you on. We were worried for a second there we weren't going to get you on, but thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, I'm on at my property in Montana. It's a little bit remote, so sometimes the connections are touch and go.
There you go. I guess so. Just taking some kind of the last time off that you get before things really get going in spring and summer. Spend a little bit of time off now.
Yeah, spring break. Man, it's been just fast and furious, as anyone and everyone could imagine, from the time the coaching change was made and then just arriving in December, pretty much full throttle until the team just finished testing and their first off-season cycle this past Friday. And so most of the coaches, not all, but most of the coaches were able to get out, and some are still moving, some are transitioning, and others just are taking a little break. But then not this upcoming Monday, but the following Monday, we'll be back meeting with the team. First practice is Tuesday, and then, all the way through spring practice.
So I wanted to ask about spring practice. Kind of the most recent news is obviously the practices will be closed, and then no spring scrimmage. Obviously, you hinted that may be something you would kind of be forced into doing because of worries about poaching, but just kind of walk us through the pros and cons that you ended up weighing as far as ultimately making that decision with the program.
Well, sure. The instant downside or cons is the connection with the community, right? And being able to just engage and connect and bring folks to see what we're doing, how we're doing it. It always generates momentum. Most folks always leave just super impressed with the organization, the tempo, the intensity, the quality of coaching, and the quality of programs. So still so much power lies in word of mouth in terms of marketing and positive images that spread for your program, as well as high school coaches being able to come see the program and what it looks like, and so many that want to come and learn. So there's plenty of things that are challenges once you choose to close practice. Ultimately, right, players are the most important commodity that exists in college football, and the landscape has changed so significantly, and the tampering, I'm not even sure we call it that anymore. It's kind of just the normal state of affairs of players being contacted and how aggressive that's become. Any information that's provided either through video or a newsreel or someone just coming to watch practice that, makes an offhanded comment and how fast that can go. Man, Utah State has this. It just is information that I've learned is a bad risk in terms of having folks come with as aggressive as the portal is getting. And so the primary reason is to protect our current roster. We have a lot of good things going through our off-season cycle and how hard the players are working. And then also protecting the schemes and strategies that we intend to use as much as possible before we play. So there's really no reason to give that away or share or show if we don't have to, and we currently don't have to. So, that whole summary right there is how I framed it. And so reluctantly, I've closed practice, but I've also think I've done it in the best interest of Utah State and the players here and the program that I'm responsible for.
Coach, let me ask you, there seems to be a growing trend of programs, both football and men's basketball, of hiring a general manager. Just the way that the landscape is changing, the administrative requirements for coaching staff continue to evolve. Your philosophy on a general manager, and if you think you need one at Utah State?
Yeah, we're approaching fast that exact position. I have a chief of staff that's been with me 20 years. His name is Pat Hickman, and he and I together are managing so much of what the general manager is now doing. The reality is there's basically a dollar amount, and the amount of fiscal business and financial business that programs then need to start processing really is kind of the tipping point of whether you need a general manager or not. And many of them are from player personnel, and so there's a recruiting background, as is my chief of staff. And with the leaders of the collective, with the development officers on campus, with the different fundraising and all the things that are responsible now to get a roster, probably 35% of my time at this point is being devoted to the raising of funds, to then the raising of a roster. that can be competitive and lasting and represent us well. And so there becomes an amount, basically, and if you start with the A4 schools, and let's say Ohio State, right, and they're somewhere between $20 and $25 million for their roster last year, certainly they needed a general manager. When you get down to maybe $12 million a year per roster, some of the smaller A4 schools there's still a need there. And so incrementally, as you move your way down, you just have to gauge then your organizational design and then say, is the management of our roster and the finances and the negotiations and anything else that comes with that now a disproportionate draw on my time and taking away from our collective work? And we're teetering right on that. I would say most Mountain West schools and most Group of Five schools are right there at that friction point. And they might not be calling it a general manager like we aren't, but there's general manager duties for somebody in their organization.
So kind of on the subject of roster management and all those things, the House settlement obviously brings in some new challenges. And I've not been 100% sure exactly how, because I've heard things about opt-in and opt-out and whether that ends up impacting things like roster caps. I was wondering if you just kind of walk through what Utah State's relationship with the House settlement is and how that'll end up impacting the team.
Well, our athletic director just chose recently to opt in, as is really, I think, everyone that's headed to the new Pac-12. And so I don't think anyone knows for sure what the true implications of that are going to be. Certainly there's a chance for student athletes to benefit, and certainly more of that now moves in-house. That doesn't mean the collectives go away, and it certainly doesn't mean collectives go away at the Group of Five level. The reality of that, whether you opt in or opt out, you're at 105 roster spots for football now. And the opting in and opting out really throughout college athletics is providing just an amazing shift, and it's happening so fast. So at the end of this spring, 3,000 football players will not have a place on their rosters at the Division I level. So we're currently about 18 over our roster limit. Schools like Brigham Young University could be upwards of 40. Nebraska could be upwards of 50 over their roster limit now, which is at 105. And so once the House settlement goes in effect, or if someone opts in, right, all the roster limitations or new roster numbers go into effect for all the sports to try to make sure Title IX is also addressed appropriately. And then you decide, where do the House settlement dollars go and in what proportion? And, some will say, man, 75% is going to football, maybe 20 is going to basketball, 5% to Olympic sports, or any other formula, right? Each school can decide that. But it is an amazing challenge and the worst time in probably college football history to be a walk-on player at the Division I level. And I'm not sure. It'll be really interesting to see if junior colleges can absorb all these roster attritions, or if there's FCS programs that have been able to hold a few open spots prior to the end of spring, or et cetera. Really interesting to see how it's going to play out.
Do you think the roster caps will end up helping Group of Five schools not lose as many of their top players to poaching into Power Four programs?
I don't. I really think it's just so. I think it will allow us to help the players that have battled and earned and carved and been able to profit. I think that will just be in place, much like it is with the collective now. I really just see a downside after that part. That is a positive. After that part, it's difficult to practice when the fewer roster spots you have, right? The more the more difficult it becomes to maintain, manage, and keep your roster healthy, because you're practicing against fewer players, and you're now doing so with a longer season than there's ever been. And so longer season, fewer roster spots, that doesn't lead to, for the betterment of college football, it really makes it harder to manage the roster. And that becomes not truly an NFL model, but some of the practices the NFL uses, right, become more relevant now just because of roster size.
We're talking to Coach Bronco Mendenhall, new head coach for the Utah State football program. And Coach, how would you assess the part of the season so far, in that it's been mostly strength and conditioning, but from the videos that we're seeing on social media, it's interesting seeing these players. They're wearing this very basic shirts and shorts with just their names on the front. You've got a very different program about how players evolve and earn things that most players take for granted, even their roster number or their jersey number. How would you assess how this has been going so far, about how these players are understanding what you're asking of them and actually starting to see it implemented?
Yeah, I think the best answer will come from them. But from what I've seen, again, my philosophy is, and my passion is centered around the development of young people. I do it through the game of college football and successful college football, and have for now 18 years. I'm not looking, nor am I interested in entitlement or soft or spoiled people that college athletics, for some way, shape, or form, makes them feel better than anyone else in society. I'm for kids that they battle and they work and they're consistent and they're tough and they're durable and they show resolve, and they're good teammates and they're unselfish and they learn how to contribute to others, and they become just great people. And everything in our program, much like the martial arts, if you were to, I don't know, go into a dojo and you're just beginning, you'd be issued a white belt. And you, when you get a different colored belt, is when you've earned it. That means you've tested, you've demonstrated competencies, you've worked, and you've shown that you're ready and are qualified for something else. So in my program, as you've seen, if you've seen videos, and our players all start in white, even though there's plenty of upperclassmen. That just means in our program, symbolically, we're all starting from there. And then, again, after 9 weeks, we just finished testing. Many have just changed colors and have moved, and they've moved in relation to what they've demonstrated in terms of their testing, and they'll be wearing those colors now until the end of the next 9-week cycle, and they'll move as frequently or as fast as they choose to work. There isn't really excuses. There's not complaints. There's not bad luck. This is just they carve out their future, and I'm just glad to help and reward them every time they move. And we celebrate like crazy when any player moves, because not only are they improving, but each color change moves our entire team forward, so our team knows they're getting better. And so, yeah, the earn not given-ish approach is paramount to the development, really, of any human being. I just choose to apply it in my work in college football. And the players here, when you're asking how they're doing, most of the programs I've taken over at Brigham Young, and taking over at a pretty tough time there, about a third of the team left in this first off-season cycle. Virginia, a struggling program, about a third of the players then changed there in the first off-season cycle. Again, knowing that, right, they didn't pick me, the administration picked me. And so my programs are very demanding. They're really challenging. They're really tightly run. And it's not for everybody. When I went to the University of New Mexico, as I returned to coaching, about a third there, less players here than any other places I've coached in terms of them moving forward or saying this isn't for me. These kids they're grittier, they're more resilient, they're more hopeful, they're more sticky, they're battling, and they're almost defiant of, no, I'm not going, which has been really fun to see. We go through spring practice, and sometimes role assignments and how things play out that way, and the roles they earned isn't what they want, and there could be transfers. But to this point, this is the fewest players I've had leave a program in transition so far.
So I want to ask about the kind of what you expect to see from this team, on the field through the spring process. Like whenever we talk coaches after spring ball, it's always, we're not a finished product. And obviously, it'd be surprised if you were a finished product in the spring. But like, what do you want to see from these guys in spring? What kind of development do you want to see on the field, knowing that even at the end of the process, there's still going to be some work to do over the summer and fall?
Yeah, well, the very first thing is to learn to try hard. And that sounds pretty simple and fundamental, but I value effort at the very highest level, and trying hard just isn't natural for most people. And sometimes someone will say, man, I just gave 100%, and I usually don't agree. 100% it's everything that you have, and many of us, gosh, if we ever are able to do that, what a huge accomplishment. So this spring, I'd love to continue to establish our culture, which I think culture precedes performance, so a culture of effort. Physicality. I love physical and contact-oriented football. We're an accountability, discipline, and effort program, so that's the cultural part that will be driving home. And then we'll be installing schemes and strategies and evaluating talent. And so I'd love to come out of spring with a team that has taken a step forward in terms of our culture. That means effort and physicality, that we've seen installations with our existing personnel and how they might fit or what adjustments we might have. And then I've also seen our roster and what that truly looks like, playing football, not just running and lifting and the different drills that we're doing, but actually playing the game. And that then frames the next segment, which the transfer portal opens at the end of our spring practices. We have about a week carryover, so we're practicing through the last week of it. A year ago, when I was coaching in Mexico, we had to add 17 more scholarship players at the end of spring, which was crazy, 30 more roster spots total. I don't anticipate that here, but there could be some attrition and there could be some needs, and all the assessment I just said, right, then that'll lead us to that window prior to summer training and then fall camp.
Practices are going to be closed, and remind us, how many practices do you get with the team?
We get 15, and within those 15 practices, 3 of those are helmet practices, which are non-contact practices. You get another number of practices which there's no tackling. You get another select number of practices that have to be 50% or under 50% tackling, and you get 3 total scrimmages, which means 50% or more of the plays can be tackle-oriented. So it's pretty specific on what format you can use.
Gotcha. And do you feel like I know there's a lot of these guys in this coaching staff who have followed you either as assistants or position coaches or former players, and you feel like, and you know, you've just talked about how they're still trying to find their way here personally and finding their own landing spots, but how would you assess they're doing in understanding this group and then wanting to execute this spring plan for this team this year?
Oh, we're fast. This isn't a perfect analogy, but this is more like a SEAL team deployment, right? Of these people have been together with me for so long, either as players or coaches, etc. This is more just picking us up, moving us over, dropping us down, making the adaptations, design changes, organizational plans that needed to be adjusted to our current personnel, and then going full speed. So we're fast, efficient, ready, and anxious to work, and alignment's already in place, trust is already in place, competency's already in place, great relationships already exist. So basically the players at Utah State have just inherited a full staff that kind of travels as a pack. There was a few changes between New Mexico and here, but they were just replaced with others, in most cases, that I have a long history with.
And we're talking with Utah State football head coach Bronco Mendenhall here with Jason Walker and Eric Frandsen. Bronco, probably the final couple of questions for me. I wanted to ask your thoughts on a couple of potential rule changes that are kind of being mulled. I think they were introduced by one of the coaching committees. The first one, and it's one that I hadn't really thought of, but apparently is an issue that a lot of coaches are keyed in on, and that is faking injuries, essentially, to slow down teams. Well, curious your thoughts on how prevalent that is and how much of an issue how much needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it's very prevalent, and it's prevalent in relation to the character of the head coach, which unfortunately in college football currently, I would say the majority of teams feign injuries, which I think is just simply wrong, and it's against the rules, and it's not sportsmanlike, and it's not honest. And I've been an opponent of some of those teams and just simply watched a player get a signal from his sideline and then just fall down and grab something. And unfortunately, it does exist. I was on the American Football Coaches Association board for about 12 years, and I was part of a conversation many years ago about this, and my suggestion at that point was the player ought to come out and have to stay out the entire rest of the series. And that didn't receive any support. The similar approach was just suggested again. It received some support, but ended up without not being the approach, other than it would just cost the team a timeout. So the player would have to come out if they want him back in. Then, right? If it's after the whistle or the play has been signaled to end, then there's be a timeout that the team has to use to get the guy back in. So it ended up a little bit more mild in terms of where the outcome is, but it's a problem. It sets a poor precedent not only for young people in terms of what sportsmanship really looks like, but I think it's just bad for the game. And so, yeah, unfortunately, it's widespread, and it needs to be addressed.
And then kind of the other rule change. It's been a minute since this was in the news, but the thoughts of the changing the transfer portal, essentially removing the spring window, and then I think the proposal was to have basically the one window be like a 10-day window in January. Is that something you feel like is feasible, given that that's right around when players need to be enrolling in classes?
Yeah. So it was voted on unanimously at the coaching convention, one portal window, which would be mid-year. I'm actually for one portal window, and I'm for eliminating the one at the end of the spring. And the reason simply being is at the group of 5 level, those teams are most susceptible to players being taken at the end of the spring, and it's very difficult to replace them before summer. It's hard to find enough, to have enough due diligence, but also the new players you are bringing in didn't go through your offseason program, weren't with you for spring practice. And to get them onboarded and integrated in your team a year ago, we were about game 4, where I truly felt our team had come together, adding the new 30-ish players that we'd added after spring practice. And so I'm for eliminating the spring window. The downside for us at Utah State, and this is the reason I voted against it, is school starts this upcoming year, January 4th. That would literally eliminate us from being able to use the transfer portal unless Utah State's academic calendar changed, or we found some way to have players arrive and either take remote or online or coursework somehow where they have a chance to catch up, maybe 3 up to even 4 weeks after the semester is started. And that's about how long it takes for the window to be open, get recruits on grounds, have them commit, etc., and then have them arrive. And so there are other schools that have the early January enrollment like we do. I'm not sure how they voted. I'm not sure how they could have voted for it unless the institutions are willing to give them some grace that way. Many are starting right the 3rd or 4th week in January, and they're the ones right that it fits best for. So I love the mid-season transfer window open only option. I don't have the answer yet, nor do I have the authority to make that decision for Utah State. But if our admissions and our school starts at the same time it's going to for next season, and the transfer portal moves there, I'm not sure how we use it.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time. Enjoy your time in Montana with a little bit of time off before you get back into things with spring practices starting next week underway. But thanks so much for your time. We look forward to seeing Utah State football on the field again.
Yeah, same here, and thanks. Nice to be with you guys.
All right, we'll go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be back after this here on the Full Court Press.